I never expected my quiet summer to feel like the beginning of something dangerous. Honestly, I thought I was past surprises like this, past the quickening of my heart when someone walked into a room, or the way one small smile could feel like a secret meant only for me. But that all changed the day Jason showed up on my doorstep. It had been 5 years since I'd last seen him, back when he was just my neighbor's teenage son, all awkward limbs and shy hellos. I was 38 now, freshly divorced, nursing an ache that went deeper than loneliness, and not expecting any kind of thrill to walk back into my life. But when I opened the door that morning, standing there in the golden heat of July, everything shifted. He had grown into himself. That boy I once handed juice boxes to had become a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a quiet confidence in the way he held his body. His voice was deeper, his jaw more defined, but it was his eyes that did it. That same soft brown, still boyish somehow, but looking at me like he saw something no one else did. He scratched the back of his neck, a nervous habit he used to have, and said, "Hey, Miss Carter, my mom mentioned you might need help with a few things around the house." I froze for a second, trying to process how strange it was to see him like that, how grown he looked, how good he looked. I told him to drop the mist, that he could call me Rachel now, and invited him in. I didn't really need help. Not exactly. But I wasn't going to turn him away. It started simple. He fixed a broken gate out back, helped me lift a dresser up the stairs, even mowed the lawn when my machine jammed. He'd stay after to talk sometimes, sitting on the porch with me in the late afternoon sun. We'd talk about everything and nothing: his job hunt, my failed marriage, the old neighborhood gossip. But the thing is, I started to feel again. Laughing with him made me forget how empty my house had felt since my ex left. There was an ease between us, but something under it too. A tension. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that Jason was just being kind, that I was projecting feelings onto someone younger, someone off limits. But then came the moment I couldn't explain away. We were sitting on the porch. I had made lemonade, and he sat down beside me, not across, not casually leaning back, but close, so close our arms brushed. I could smell his cologne, warm and clean. We were laughing about some ridiculous old memory when he suddenly stopped and looked at me. Really looked. "You always smell like vanilla," he said. Just like that. I blinked, caught off guard. "Is that a good thing?" I asked, trying to laugh it off. His voice was quieter when he answered, "Yeah, it's real nice." My breath caught. The air felt too thick. I could hear the cicadas buzzing in the trees, feel the sweat sliding down my back, but all I really felt was him, too close, too warm, too much. I looked away, then back again. He hadn't moved. I swear the world tilted in that second. That night, I lay in bed replaying every second. The way his knee had grazed mine, the slow way he said vanilla, like it meant something else. I told myself it was a fluke, that nothing had happened, that I was being ridiculous. But deep down, I knew, the next time he came by, he didn't sit beside me. He sat closer. Our knees touched, our hands brushed, and when he reached past me to grab the remote, his chest pressed against my back for a second too long. I froze. He didn't move. The silence was loud, like we were both holding our breath. I don't know when it stopped feeling innocent. I only know that I started dressing differently on the days he was coming by. Nothing obvious, just a little softer, a little lower. I wore perfume. I checked my reflection twice. And the way he looked at me, like he was waiting for me to admit something, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I hated how much I wanted him, hated how my body came alive when he walked into a room. I hadn't felt like that in years, not since before the divorce, not since before I lost myself in taking care of everyone else. I kept trying to draw lines in my mind. He's too young. He's your neighbor's son. This can't go anywhere. But the truth was, he saw me, not as a mother, not as a divorcee, not as some broken woman with baggage. He saw me as me. And that was the most dangerous part of all. I wish I could say I tried harder to resist him, that I drew a line in the sand and stuck to it. But the truth is I didn't want to. Something about Jason pulled me in like a tide I couldn't fight. And part of me didn't want to be saved. It wasn't just attraction. It was the way he looked at me, like I was a woman, not a cautionary tale, like I was worth wanting. After so many years of feeling invisible, dismissed or pitied, that alone was intoxicating. Still, I kept pretending this was just a summer distraction, harmless and innocent, that I could keep my feelings in check. But then came the night everything changed. It was late, just after sunset. One of those heavy, humid evenings where the air feels thick and intimate. I had just finished cleaning up after dinner and was struggling to open a jar of marinara when I heard a knock on the back door. Jason. He hadn't called or texted, just showed up, and I didn't even pretend to be annoyed. He came inside like he belonged there, which, in some strange way, he did. He walked up behind me in the kitchen, laughing softly. Need help? I handed him the jar without turning around. His fingers brushed mine just a graze, but it felt electric. He opened it with a pop and set it down. And when I turned to thank him, he was closer than he'd ever been, and then he kissed me, just like that. No warning, no build-up, just heat in mouth and the soft, desperate sound I made before I could stop it. For a second, I froze. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out every reasonable thought in my head. Then I kissed him back. There was nothing soft about it after that. His hands were on my waist, pulling me against him, and mine were in his hair, on his back, grabbing, kneading. We barely made it to the couch, hands tangled in clothes, mouths finding places we weren't supposed to touch. He kissed my neck like he'd imagined it 100 times. I arched into him like I hadn't been touched in years because I had single quotes T.it wasn't perfect. We fumbled, laughed breathlessly, whispered each other's names like a prayer. But it was real, hot, intimate, messy in a way that made me feel alive again. After we lay there tangled in silence, my leg over his, my fingers tracing lazy circles on his chest. I should have said something wise or responsible. Instead, I whispered, I shouldn't have done that. He didn't flinch. He just looked at me and said, why not? I didn't have an answer, not one that made sense in that moment. The next day, I expected everything to feel weird. I thought maybe he'd avoid me, or I'd feel guilt wash over me like a cold wave. But none of that happened. If anything, the tension that had been building between us for weeks had finally settled into something even more dangerous. Comfort, ease. We still talked and laughed like before, but now there were stolen kisses in the hallway, whispered jokes with double meanings, long looks that made my skin burn. We were careful, at least we tried to be. But desire makes you reckless, and comfort makes you blind. The affair, because that's what it had become, wasn't just physical. That's what scared me most. It wasn't just about heat, it was about need. The way I'd melt into him at night. The way he'd trace the inside of my wrist with his thumb like he couldn't stop touching me. We'd lie together and talk about everything, his dreams, my regrets, the books we loved, the lives we'd almost had. One night, as we lay tangled in sheets that smelled like sweat and vanilla, He brushed my hair off my face and said, "You feel more real to me than anyone I've ever known." I swallowed hard. You shouldn't say things like that. But it's true. And I believe him. That's what made it worse. Still, I knew this couldn't last. I'd catch glimpses of his mother through the window watering her garden, chatting with my other neighbors, and I'd feel the sharp stab of guilt. Not just because Jason was her son, but because I'd known him since he was a boy. I was part of the world that raised him. I kept trying to tell myself I was just something temporary to him, a summer secret. But every time he kissed me, every time he held my hand when no one could see, he made me feel like maybe we were more. I tried to talk to him about it once. Late one night after we'd made love in the garage of all places, I asked, "What happens when summer ends?" He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. "Why do you always talk like this is doomed?" "Because it is, Jason. You're 24. I might know how old you are." He cut in. "I don't care." But I did. And I knew the world would too. Still, I kept letting him in. Every time he touched me, I gave him another piece of myself. I told myself love didn't care about age or neighbors or what people might say, but deep down, I knew something was coming. A crack, a shift, a consequence. I just didn't know it would break me open. And I didn't know how quickly it would all fall apart. Looking back, the first sign something was wrong wasn't the silence, it was the change in his silence. Before, when Jason didn't text for a few hours, I'd brush it off. He was helping his dad repaint the basement, or job hunting, or visiting a friend. But that week, his absence felt intentional, like a door quietly closing behind me while I wasn't looking. I kept checking my phone. I reread our last message thread, where he said he'd stop by after dinner. He didn't. I waited. I didn't want to seem needy, but my heart was already slipping into panic. After 2 days, I texted, "Everything okay?" No answer. I told myself not to spiral, but it was too late. The tension wrapped around my chest like a vice. He hadn't ghosted me. He couldn't. We were more than that. He told me things he said he'd never told anyone. He kissed me like he meant it. He looked at me like I was the only real thing in the world. By the 4th day, I caved. I drove to his parents' house under the excuse of needing to borrow hedge clippers. His mom greeted me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, I think Jason has them in the garage," she said, coolly. "I'll get them." She didn't invite me in. She didn't ask how I was. My stomach twisted. And then I saw him, out on the porch laughing, with his dad. Like the past few weeks hadn't happened. Like we hadn't happened. I felt humiliated, confused, furious. I waited until that night to confront him. I texted, told him I needed to talk. To my surprise, he came. He showed up looking tired, anxious, older somehow. He didn't even try to pretend everything was okay. "Are you ghosting me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Because, if you are, just say it. Don't leave me twisting like this." Jason sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "No, I mean, yes, sort of. It's just, things got complicated." I stared at him. "Complicated how?" He hesitated, then looked up, and in that moment I knew someone found out. "My dad saw us," he said, "that night, in your driveway. We didn't see him, but he saw." He told my mom. I felt the blood drain from my face. "He told your mom?" Jason nodded, eyes full of guilt. "They lost it. Said I was being manipulated. That it was inappropriate. My mom said I wasn't thinking clearly." I laughed bitterly. "So now I'm some kind of predator?" "No. That's not what I think, but it's what they think." He didn't answer. I stepped back, shaking. "So what now? They told you to end it and you just did?" It's not that simple, he said, stepping toward me. They said they'd cut me off. They said if I stayed involved with you, they'd throw me out. No support. No help with rent, no car. So you chose them. Jason flinched like I'd slapped him. I didn't choose anything. This whole thing blew up faster than I thought it would. Tears burned behind my eyes. You said you felt seen with me. You said I was real. I meant it, he said, his voice raw. But I don't know how to fight them. Not right now. I swallowed hard. So you're choosing the easier path, just for now. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him, shake him, make him remember what we shared. But I knew it was over. Maybe not in his heart. Maybe not in mine, but in every way that counted. It was over. After he left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the place we kissed that first night. The ghost of it still lived there. And in the hallway, the couch, my sheets, the whispers started soon after. I don't know who his mom told or how fast it spread, but it spread. The neighbor across the street stopped waving. My friend from yoga stopped returning my messages. At book club, there were quiet glances and pauses when I walked in, like they were waiting for me to admit it, to confirm what they all suspected, that I'd crossed a line I wasn't supposed to. I went from invisible to infamous in 1 week, and Jason, he disappeared. No texts, no knocks on the door, no late-night whispers or stolen kisses. Just gone. The last message came a week later. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to end like this. I just can't fight them right now. Maybe someday. Maybe someday. I read it 100 times, and then I deleted it. I didn't reply. I didn't cry right away either. That came later, all at once, in the middle of folding towels. I broke. My knees hit the floor, and I sobbed into the cotton like it could hold the ache. But even through the pain, through the betrayal and the shame, I knew one thing. I didn't regret loving him. I didn't regret wanting. What I regretted was letting someone else decide when it had to end. Summer turned to fall, and everything about the world around me seemed to move on except me. The neighborhood cooled down. Lawns lost their color. Leaves littered my driveway, but I didn't care enough to rake them. I spent my days pretending I was fine. I busied myself with small things, rearranging bookshelves, cooking elaborate meals. For one, reorganizing closets that didn't need reorganizing. Anything to keep me from thinking about him. But the silence he left behind filled every space he used to touch. I still caught myself checking my phone, even though I knew he wouldn't text. I still stood on the porch some nights, looking down the street like he might walk up that path again with his easy smile and warm hands. He didn't. And maybe that should have been the end. I tried to date again. I let friends set me up an accountant, a quiet music teacher, even someone who taught law at the community college. They were all kind, stable, older. They didn't flirt with their eyes. They didn't press their fingers into the small of my back just to feel me shiver. They didn't make me feel anything at all. One night, after another awkward dinner with a man who called me ma'am, I came home and poured a glass of wine I didn't want. I sat in the dark living room with the window open, letting the crisp air roll in. I was tired of pretending, tired of telling myself I had learned a lesson or that I was better off, because the truth was, I missed him. Not just the heat, not just the thrill. I missed Jason, his laugh, his stubbornness, his stupid habit of leaving his shoes right by the door. And I hated that I didn't even get to hate him properly. He didn't cheat. He didn't lie. He caved. He chose the easier road, and I was the mess left behind. Then came the knock. 3 short raps on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart jumped. I stood slowly, telling myself it couldn't be him. That was months ago. I hadn't heard from him in almost 8 weeks. But when I opened the door, there he was. Jason stood there like no time had passed. But everything about him looked changed. Older, tired. His hair was longer. His jaw scruffier. His expression unreadable. "Hi," he said softly. I stared. "What are you doing here? I needed to see you." I crossed my arms, unsure whether to scream or slam the door. "Now? After vanishing like I meant nothing?" "I know," he said, stepping forward. Hands raised like I was fire and he was trying not to get burned. "I messed up. I didn't know how to fix it. You could have tried." He winced. I was scared. They threatened to cut me off. And they did. They weren't bluffing. I left home. I got a place. It's small and stupid. And I'm sleeping on a mattress on the floor. But it's mine. I blinked, trying to process it. "You moved out?" "Yeah, a month ago. I got a part-time job at the mechanic shop near Main Street. Been walking to work." He smiled. Tired but proud. Figured out I didn't want to live a life that didn't include the things I wanted. And I wanted you, Rachel. Still do. My throat tightened. "You can't just come back and say that like it fixes everything." "I'm not here to fix it," he said, voice low. "I'm here to ask for another chance. If you still feel anything at all, let me in. Just talk to me. Tell me how you've been. Tell me to leave, if that's what you need. But don't shut the door before we even try." I didn't answer. I looked at his face, searching for cracks. I expected anger, or desperation, or maybe a manipulative charm. But all I saw was realness. A quiet ache that mirrored my own. So I stepped aside. We didn't talk much that night. We sat on the couch, the same couch where we first kissed, and drank tea. He told me about his job. I told him about my failed dates. There were long silences, but they weren't uncomfortable. They felt like a slow unraveling of the knot that had twisted between us. And then, after a long pause, he reached out, just took my hand in his, like it still belonged there. "I'm not asking for forever," he whispered. "Just a beginning." Something in me softened. I thought I'd hardened past the point of forgiveness. But love doesn't always work like that. It breaks you. Yes, but sometimes it leaves a crack just wide enough for light to get back in. I squeezed his hand. "Okay, a beginning." We didn't rush into bed that night. We just held each other. It was softer than I remembered. Warmer. Sadder too, but in a beautiful way. Like we'd both walked through something and survived. I don't know what comes next. The world still whispers. People still stare. But I've stopped caring, because sometimes love doesn't look like a fairy tale. Sometimes it looks like a knock at your door when you thought everyone had forgotten you. And sometimes it looks like the boy next door coming back as a man who finally knows what he wants. Me.